boom, right across the temple of the head. So I just beat him until he died.
November 25th, 1996, Eustis, Florida. A quiet home shattered by brutal violence. Two parents were found bludgeoned to death. Their teenage daughter is missing and is probably in cahoots with the killer, a disturbed teen claiming to be a 500-year-old vampire. These are teenage serial killers who flipped out at disrespectful interviewers.
Alright, so you put the clothes in the attic, you put the knives in the shed. What else do you do?
Live with guilt till I get caught.
The tape rolls, capturing Craig Price's voice. Flat, cold, almost casual. As he discusses covering up evidence after brutally killing a mother and her two daughters. This is not the confession of a remorseful teenager. It's the calculated response of someone who understood exactly what he was doing, even at just 15 years old. He begins describing that Labor Day weekend in 1989, when the normally tight-knit Heaton family went silent. Marie Bouchard, Joan Heaton's mother, couldn't reach her daughter or granddaughters. Jennifer, 10, and Melissa, just 8. By September 4th, they drove to the family's Warwick home and discovered the unimaginable. Blood everywhere, bodies hidden beneath sheets and rugs. The aftermath of Price's rage. Detectives at the scene saw horror beyond their experience. Joan had been stabbed nearly 60 times, bludgeoned and strangled. Jennifer suffered 62 stab wounds. Melissa's tiny body showed brutal beating and stabbing so severe that one knife blade broke off in her neck. It was clear the family fought desperately for their lives. But Price left clues. A bloody sock print from a size 13 foot, bandage wrappers in the bathroom, and a trail of violence that pointed straight back to him. He claimed he entered the house to steal a VCR, but detectives doubted that. He'd taken off his shoes, entered through a bathroom window, and calmly drank orange juice from the fridge. Details he shares in the interrogation tape as if discussing breakfast rather than murder.
And I grabbed her. What happened then? So I was just like trying to kill her.
Price recounts how he struggled with Joan, grabbed knives from the kitchen block, using so many that the handles broke off. When asked how many knives, he casually responds, "About 6, I think maybe." Completely matter of fact. The evidence against him grew overwhelming. Police discovered a trash bag in his family's shed containing bloody clothes, gloves, and knives from the Heaton home. His response? He'd just put everything in the bag and attempted a quick cleanup before escaping back through the window. As investigators dug deeper, they connected Price to another unsolved murder, Rebecca Spencer, killed 2 years earlier on the same block. Initially, Price denied it, but under pressure, he finally admitted to that crime too.
And I was running back to the window back and forth to see if the police were coming or something like that.
If you can remember, how many knives did you use?
I don't know, a lot. About 6, I think, maybe.
His accounts of the murders became increasingly chilling, marked by his complete lack of emotion. The only time Price showed any feeling was when discussing the cut he received during the struggle, more concerned about his own wound than his victim's suffering. Psychiatric evaluations paint a damning picture. Dr. Wesley Prophet, who examined Price, wrote, "Craig Price is a serial killer who was in a psychotic rage at the time of the murders. He is in dire need of extensive treatment, and even then may not be in a position to be safely placed in the community." But Price refused all court-ordered treatment, fearing, correctly, that it would keep him locked up past his 21st birthday.
"I'm going to kill every officer I can get my hands on, just like I killed those little kids." New chilling threats from serial killer Craig Price just months ago.
Get me out of state. That's what I want to do.
As Price approached 21, his behavior in custody gave officials the ammunition they needed to keep him behind bars. He threatened to snuff out corrections officers, extorted others, and racked up a series of prison infractions, including assault, extortion, and contempt charges. Each incident added years to his sentence, ensuring he wouldn't walk free at 21 as originally planned.
Okay, you covered the mother. Do you remember what you covered the other children with?
The rug.
Okay. All right. Why did you call him?
Because I didn't want to look at that.
His reasoning for covering the bodies. Because I didn't want to look at that. Not out of remorse, but simply a selfish desire to avoid facing the consequences of his actions. Even visually, the community of Warwick, Rhode Island responded with outrage and determination. Citizens opposed to the release of Craig Price, CRP, formed, led by Detective Kevin Collins and Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Pine. They changed state law so juveniles committing serious crimes could be tried as adults. While the new law couldn't be applied retroactively to Price, it ensured no similar case would slip through legal cracks again.
This killer is at it again, threatening prison guards and boasting about the murders he committed decades ago. Craig Price killed 4 of his neighbors in Warwick in the late 1980s, including 2 children.
Decades after his initial crimes, Price remains a threat behind bars. His violent behavior continues, stabbing fellow inmates, attacking guards, and accumulating new charges that keep extending his sentence. The initial scheduled release date of May 2020 has been pushed further into the future with each new offense.
People have to know, just because he was 15 at the time, he wasn't just some poor little innocent kid that went astray. He killed 4 people.
Retired Detective Ken Anderson, who helped take Price into custody, sums up the community's sentiment.
This man belongs in prison the rest of his life. Never let this go.
Because that's unthinkable that a 13-year-old boy can do that. When my son was 13, he was playing Little League. Craig Price was 13, he was murdering his neighbor. When he's 15, he's murdering little girls.
Prosecutor Patrick Youngs drives home the horrifying reality.
When my son was 13, he was playing Little League. Craig Price was 13, he was murdering his neighbor. When he was 15, he was girls. Even when Kaga.
Price toyed with investigators, initially denying the Spencer murder but taunting them about their evidence, knowing his rights as a juvenile protected him from adult prosecution. Craig Price's case stands as a chilling example of juvenile justice loopholes and the system's struggle to contain a true predator. His story forced legal reform, but his continued violence behind bars proves that sometimes the threat never truly disappears. If you think Craig Price's story is disturbing, wait until you see what happens when another teenage killer faces the system with an absolute lack of conscience and remorse.
I snapped. I lost full control of myself. I saw red. And the next thing I knew, I was basically covered in blood.
It started as a fantasy. It ended in blood. Rod Farrell, a 16-year-old from rural Kentucky, would have become known as the Vampire Killer. His crimes would horrify the country and cement his place in the annals of teenage murderers who lost control. But behind the headlines and sensationalism lies a story of obsession, manipulation, and a descent into darkness. Farrell didn't start as a monster. He was born in Murray, Kentucky in 1980 to a teenage mother with her own dark fascinations. His father left early, joining the military, and leaving Rod in the care of his mother, Sandra Gibson, a woman who, by her own admission, dabbled in vampirism and introduced Rod to the world that would eventually consume him.
Look, it was supposed to be the nurturing of a connection between you and whoever you were taking the blood from or sharing the blood with. It's supposed to be intimate.
By his early teens, Farrell was fully immersed in gothic culture, dark music, and role-playing games like Vampire: The Masquerade. But for Rod, the line between game and reality blurred dangerously. He believed he was Visago, a 500-year-old vampire, and he wasn't alone. He became the leader of the so-called Vampire Clan, a group of disaffected teens drawn to his charisma and dark fantasies. It was at Land Between the Lakes, an abandoned structure the group called Hotel California, where they performed blood-drinking rituals and plotted their journeys into darkness. But it was Heather Wendorf, a 15-year-old from Eustis, Florida, who would have become the catalyst for Farrell's murderous descent.
I asked her, I said, since you've spoken so much about killing your parents over the past year, I was like, do you still want me to?
And what did she say?
She said, yeah.
Heather claimed her parents were abusive, accusations that would later be disputed, but nonetheless fueled Farrell's sense of purpose. On November 25, 1996, Farrell and his accomplice, Howard Anderson, entered the Wendorf home through an unlocked garage. What happened next was pure brutality. Richard Wendorf was asleep on the couch when Farrell struck him repeatedly with a crowbar. The attack was so vicious it fractured his skull and ribs. Ruth Wendorf, emerging from the shower, encountered Farrell holding the bloody weapon. A cup of hot coffee thrown in his face sealed her fate. He bludgeoned her to death with the same crowbar.
I lost full control of myself.
He repeatedly bludgeons Heather's father with the crowbar until he is beyond dead.
I have no idea how many times I swung.
The murders were horrifying enough, but the aftermath revealed Farrell's chilling detachment. He showed no remorse, later describing the killings as a rush, and claiming he felt like a god. Instead of fleeing immediately, Farrell and his group, Heather, Anderson, Charity Kesey, and Dana Cooper, stole the Wendorf's Ford Explorer and began a multi-state flight. Their escape was short-lived. On November 28th, just 3 days after the murders, the group was captured in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They were found after Charity Kesey called her grandmother for money, unaware that police were tracing the call.
But Rod and Charity seem remarkably unconcerned in this surveillance video, showing them passionately making out in their holding cell.
The group's behavior in custody shocked investigators. Surveillance footage showed Rod and Charity passionately making out in their holding cell, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of their situation. Their interviews revealed a disturbing lack of remorse or understanding of the consequences. Farrell's interrogation was particularly chilling. He admitted to the murders in graphic detail, describing how he just beat him until he died. But even more disturbing was his casual attitude toward his crimes and eventual sentencing.
Now I'm just Satan himself, so not that I really care.
In court, Farrell initially pleaded not guilty, but later shocked everyone by changing his plea to guilty on all charges. His defense painted a picture of a troubled youth, citing his abusive upbringing, mental health issues, and his mother's influence. Psychiatric evaluations diagnosed him with depression and schizotypal personality disorder, noting his history of hallucinations and delusions. But the evidence of premeditation and his post-crime behavior left little room for mercy. In February 1998, Farrell was sentenced to death, making him the youngest person on death row in the United States at the time. His reaction? Complete indifference.
Gets the max.
You are hereby sentenced to death.
But Rod almost welcomes it.
The concept of them killing me in the electric chair didn't really faze me. That's why when they announced my death sentence, I just kind of cocked an eyebrow. I was like, okay.
Even as he faced the ultimate penalty, Farrell showed no remorse. The concept of them killing me in the electric chair didn't really faze me, he later admitted in interviews. His focus seemed less on his victims and more on his own bizarre philosophy. Yet Farrell's death sentence would not stand. In November 2000, the Florida Supreme Court commuted his sentence to life in prison, recognizing that juveniles should not automatically receive life without parole. But even this didn't change Farrell's disturbing outlook. Throughout the legal proceedings, the role of Heather Wendorf remained controversial. While Farrell claimed she asked him to kill her parents, a grand jury ultimately cleared her of charges, citing a lack of evidence that she knew about the murder plot. Her contradictory statements and behavior left many, including the judge, questioning her true involvement. The other members of the vampire clan received varying sentences. Howard Anderson, originally given life without parole, had his sentence reduced to 40 years in 2018 due to a Supreme Court ruling on juvenile sentencing. Charity Kesey and Dana Cooper served shorter sentences for their roles in the murders and burglary.
And how are you going to assist?
I was going to go after the father and I was going to go after the mother. But then, when I saw him make the first blow, I knew I couldn't.
Farrell's story is more than just a tale of teenage rebellion gone wrong. It's a cautionary account of how fantasy can consume reality, how vulnerable minds can be manipulated, and how seemingly normal teenagers can descend into darkness. His lack of remorse, disturbing philosophies, and continued fascination with the occult make him a rare and troubling case in the annals of juvenile crime.
The concept of them killing me in the electric chair didn't really faze me. That's why when they announced my death sentence, I just kind of cocked an eyebrow. I was like, okay.
The sentence was later commuted to life without parole because Rod was just 16 and still a juvenile when he committed the murders.
Today, Farrell remains behind bars, his life sentence reaffirmed in 2019 after a resentencing hearing. The judge called him irreparably corrupt, citing his lack of remorse and continuing dangerous philosophies. Even now, Farrell believes he deserves another chance, that his actions were simply the result of taking the darker path. But for the families of Richard and Ruth Wendorf, and for anyone who hears Rod Farrell's story, the darkness he embraced is a stark reminder of how fantasy can become a nightmare, and how some paths, once chosen, lead only to destruction.
Somebody that vicious and what he did, no, I would not give him a chance.
Farrell's case remains a disturbing milestone in true crime history, a teenage killer who fully embraced the darkness, showing us all just how thin the line can be between fantasy and horror. His story serves as a chilling warning about the dangers of obsession, manipulation, and the seductive power of evil.
I believe all children deserve a second chance. Actually, I believe everybody in life deserves a second chance.
He didn't give a second chance to the brutal murder of the mother and father. So, no. As far as I'm concerned, you can stay there for life.
If Farrell let external influences lead him toward the dark path of evil, our next teenage serial killer allegedly lost control under the influence of a darkness coming from inside his very head.
James Fairweather was the quiet boy who became a cold-blooded multiple murderer, a serial killer obsessive who was just 15 when he repeatedly stabbed two strangers in completely random attacks.
May 29, 2014, a quiet town park in Colchester becomes the scene of a nightmare. James Atfield, a disabled father of 4, lies stabbed over 100 times, struggling for life in the early morning hours. No one could have imagined the attacker was just 15 years old. James Fairweather wasn't a typical teenager. Beneath his shy exterior, he harbored a dark obsession with serial killers. Books, DVDs, and endless online research fed a twisted fascination that would soon turn deadly.
Some voices were talking to me. You need to make a sacrifice or we're going to come and get you. You need to do it.
He told investigators that voices were compelling him to kill, demanding sacrifices as if he were caught in a terrifying grip beyond his control. This wasn't just fantasy. Fairweather claimed these voices directed him to his first victim, a man vulnerable and alone in the park. Just days before, James had been convicted for a knife-point robbery. The court had sentenced him to a youth supervision order, but no one could have predicted what would happen next.
And I saw him. It was laying on the grass, like that. It was like just fast asleep, where he was drunk. And he goes, he's the one. Do it. So I went up to him. Can I stand up? Like, yes. Went up to him. Stood over like that. So I stabbed him first there. I'd done it a few times. While I was doing that, my voices were laughing louder and louder.
In the early hours, Fairweather slipped out of his house wearing latex gloves, a grim signature he called his uniform. Armed with a large knife, he prowled the streets, searching for a victim. He found James Atfield lying drunk on the grass. What happened next was horrifying. Fairweather described stabbing him again and again, driven by a mixture of rage and chilling control. Despite his claims of being overtaken by voices, the bloodshed was methodical, showing a terrifying composure. The screams of his victim echoed through the night, but Fairweather fled before emergency services even arrived. James Atfield died hours later, his life brutally stolen.
Not far from a school playground, a search for a murder weapon. A knife used to stab this man, James Atfield, 102 times.
The community was shaken. Castle Park, once a place of leisure, now felt like a hunting ground. Police described the attack as motiveless and frenzied, baffled by the sheer brutality and lack of any obvious reason. James Atfield was a gentle, shy man, struggling to rebuild his life after a serious brain injury from a car accident. His vulnerability made the crime even more heartbreaking. The police pleaded for information as fear gripped the town. Weeks later, on June 17, 2014, the terror returned. Nahid Almania, a 31-year-old Saudi student walking to her university classes, was attacked in broad daylight on a quiet footpath.
Seen here, moments after his arrest, he had on latex gardening gloves, a key part of the uniform he always wore when he was going to kill.
Fairweather approached silently, armed with a bayonet this time. Again wearing gloves, he struck with cold precision. Nahid was stabbed multiple times, including through both eyes. A shocking and deliberate act. It was no longer just rage. This was calculated, sadistic violence fueled by Fairweather's obsession with serial killers, like the Yorkshire Ripper. The community's fears deepened. Was this the work of a racist or religiously motivated attacker? Police soon confirmed that Nahid was not targeted for her background or beliefs. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Terror ruled Colchester for nearly a year. Parks emptied, footpaths cleared, and patrols increased. But Fairweather was still out there. Then, a narrow escape changed everything. Michelle Sadler, out walking her dog near the scene of Nahid's murder, spotted Fairweather lurking. Something about his presence made her uneasy. She called the police. Fairweather was caught red-handed. He was wearing gloves again and carrying a knife. His chilling admission: he was hunting for a third victim but found no one. His arrest finally ended the nightmare for Colchester.
Detaining him for a minimum of 27 years, the judge told Fairweather his killings were brutal and sadistic. He added, "You are well aware of the publicity this first murder attracted. I have no doubt you relished the sense of power and control that it gave you."
In court, the judge described Fairweather's murders as brutal and sadistic. At just 17, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 27 years, detention at Her Majesty's pleasure. The judge noted that Fairweather had clearly enjoyed the power and control his killings gave him. His fascination with serial killers had fueled these terrible acts, and it was clear he had intended to continue his spree until stopped. The families of the victims endured unimaginable grief. James Atfield's mother spoke of losing her fun-loving son. Nahid's family described her as a warm, kind soul whose life was stolen too soon. The trauma rippled through the community, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Fairweather's defense claimed mental illness and psychosis, citing autism and voices commanding him to kill. But the jury rejected diminished responsibility, concluding he was fully aware of his actions. Today, James Fairweather remains in a secure psychiatric hospital, a stark reminder of how obsession and violence can turn a boy into a feared killer. But this is just one twisted chapter. If you think this story is shocking, wait until you hear about the next teenage killer who managed to lie her way to a tense interrogation until she lost control under the enormous pressure of a smart detective.
She died. How did she die? 9-year-old girls don't just die. We were messing her out. Then she fell back and hit her head.
The stark fluorescent lights of the interrogation room flicker as Alyssa Bustamante, just 15 years old, sits across from a determined detective. Her posture is guarded, lips pressed tight, but the pressure is mounting. The officer leans in, voice low but firm.
"We know what's in your diary. We know what you wrote that night."
She fidgets, eyes flicking to the door as if escape might still be possible, but she's caught, trapped by her own words and mounting evidence.
"I didn't kill her. She died.
We were messing around and she fell back and hit her head," she finally mumbles, voice slurring the details as if speaking through mud. It's a chilling moment, but just the start of the confession that would shock a nation. Alyssa, once considered a normal teenager in the quiet Missouri town of St. Martin's, was about to become infamous for one of the most disturbing juvenile murders in modern history. Alyssa's descent didn't happen overnight, born into chaos, her father in prison, her mother battling addiction. She and her siblings found refuge with their grandparents. Outwardly, she maintained the facade of a typical high school student, good grades, church activities, a circle of friends. but darkness brewed beneath the surface. In 2007, 2 years before the murder, Alyssa attempted suicide. The scars, both physical and emotional, never fully healed. Her online presence turned increasingly sinister. On her YouTube page, she listed killing people and among her hobbies. Friends would later recall her frequent displays of self-harm scars. But nothing could prepare anyone for what happened on October 21st, 2009. That afternoon, 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten begged her mother to visit Alyssa's younger sister, Emma. It was a routine request in their small community, where everyone knew everyone. Patricia Price, Elizabeth's mother, agreed, but it was the last time she'd see her daughter alive. When Elizabeth failed to return home by 6 o'clock, alarm bells rang immediately. The search began in earnest, with neighbors and law enforcement combing the woods and fields surrounding both families' homes. The community united in hope, unaware of the horror that had already unfolded. Investigators soon discovered a shallow, grave-like depression behind the Bustamante home. Alyssa, when questioned, claimed she enjoyed digging holes as a hobby, but her explanation rang hollow, especially when paired with mounting circumstantial evidence and her increasingly erratic behavior. The breakthrough came when authorities seized her diary. Though Alyssa attempted to obliterate the day's entry with blue ink, forensic specialists recovered her words using advanced techniques. The passage read,
"I just killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel ATM. It was amazing." As soon as you get over the "oh my god, I can't do this" feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kinda nervous and shaky though right now. Okay, I gotta go to church now. LOL.
This chilling confession revealed not.
Alyssa sharply exhales as she responds.
Yeah,
The detective successfully made Alyssa crumble after confronting her with the evidence. After removing her hysterical grandma from the interrogation room, the detective bluntly summarizes what he thinks actually happened, how she dug the holes in the forest with premeditation, how Alyssa knew she was going to kill Elizabeth before taking her to the forest. And once again, he emphasizes the question on how she killed her, obtaining a confirmation on her previous confession.
Is that what happened? Yes.
The community reels from the revelation. How could a seemingly normal teenager commit such a calculated, brutal act? The answer perhaps lies in Alyssa's own words during her interrogation. She describes herself as easily bored, entertained by simple things like digging holes. But her online presence tells a darker story: obsessions with death, violence, and self-destruction.
If convicted of first-degree murder, Bustamante could not have been executed because of her age. Under Missouri law, the only other option was life in prison without parole.
Legally, Alyssa's age presented complications. At 15, she couldn't face the death penalty under Missouri law. Life without parole was the harshest sentence available if convicted of first-degree murder. But as the case unfolded, a crucial Supreme Court decision loomed on the horizon, one that might change how juvenile offenders were sentenced.
Basically, the main reason for accepting the offer was to avoid the absolute certainty of life without parole. If there was another option, then there would have been no reason to have accepted that offer.
Facing the certainty of spending her life behind bars, Alyssa took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, securing a shot at parole after 30 years. In her own words, basically the main reason for accepting the offer was to avoid the absolute certainty of life without parole. The courtroom scenes are haunting. Alyssa, now officially an adult, sits in shackles, expressionless as the verdict is read. The victim's family weeps, the weight of loss tangible in the air. But even as she's led away to begin her sentence, the story doesn't end. In 2014, Alyssa attempted to withdraw her guilty plea, arguing she was unaware of the pending Supreme Court case that could have affected her sentence. The judge denied her request, cementing the original deal. But the legal battles continued. In 2017, Elizabeth's mother, Patricia Price, settled a wrongful death lawsuit against Alyssa for $5 million. The agreement requires Alyssa to notify Price of any compensation she might receive from publicity about the case.
Now, 2 days past her 20th birthday, Alyssa Bustamante is still recognizable as the teenager arrested in the fall of 2009 for the murder of 9-year-old neighbor Elizabeth Olton.
Today, Alyssa sits in the Chillicothe Correctional Center, facing a life sentence plus 30 years. Recent changes to Missouri's parole laws briefly gave her hope for an earlier release, but subsequent amendments closed that loophole. Even if granted parole on her life sentence, she'll still serve at least 15 years of her consecutive sentence before any possibility of freedom. This case forced Missouri and the nation to confront difficult questions about juvenile justice. How should society deal with young offenders capable of such heinous acts? Where is the line between punishment and rehabilitation for children who commit adult crimes? For the Olten family, no legal outcome could ever balance the scales. Their daughter's life was taken senselessly, her future stolen by a teenager's dark curiosity. For St. Martin's, the tragedy remains a somber reminder that evil can lurk behind the most innocent of facades.